give a huge, round, warm applause for Chris Borbely!
Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. When you have a captain like this, you don't need anything else. So it's great to see. Quite a few familiar faces. Some others meet me the first time. So my name is Krisztian Borbely. I work for Amadeus. I'm leading the central FinOps team in Amadeus and the practice globally for the company. And I'm also a FinOps ambassador in Germany. But what we'll talk about today is the beloved topic when I speak to some other colleagues of mine and fellow practitioners, how to manage the cloud budget and forecasting. So just give me a bit of a show of hands. Who is trying to manage the forecasting, the budgeting, and the follow-up of the cloud budgets centrally? Be part of a... Okay, you guys are definitely in the good room, okay? The other part is good as well, but from that I would like to learn how you guys did that. So I will show a bit our journey. Maybe you take away a few things that you can go a bit faster. You don't feel like I felt sometimes that Don Quixote. They say, look, how we are going to crack this nut, okay? I'm fully aware that I'm between you and your lunch and some people are standing, so just get straight into it. We even skip the agenda. So, trying to manage central budget, all right? Central budgeting, I really feel it's the place between the rock and the hard place. All right, so on one side, you have your finance colleagues say, look, this is your target, right? You need to hit the target, that's the budget, it has been set up, no matter what, that's the budget. And then at the same time, we move to the cloud because we want to have agility. We want to have speed, we want to have flexibility. We want to spend when we need to spend, and we want to increase the spend when we want to spend it, and we want to decrease it. So how does the two kind of comes together? So that analogy looks familiar to someone, apart from myself. All right, I see people nodding. That's very cool, all right? So let's get exchange. Just a bit of a very brief things on Amadeus as from where we are coming from. I will use that in an example. So, okay, the ones who were in Amsterdam, they are not allowed to show hands here, but who knows what Amadeus is doing? Okay, I could take a bet with Joe that at least 80% of the room used us for the last 6 months. Joe, are you in? Yeah. All right. Okay, so who has taken a scheduled flight in Europe in the last 6 months? Oh, we are getting there, we are getting there. Sorry, keep the hands up. Who has searched for a flight online with any online travel agency? All right, I think I have a drink tonight, huh? So thank you. So we are powering the global travel and tourism industry from the IT side, managing all the shopping, reservation, bookings for airlines, hotels, car provider, rail, and so on and so forth. We used to operate in a data center environment. We still do. However, we embraced in a full public cloud transformation where we are moving all of our workloads to the cloud. So the 4 more technical guys in the audience, it's quite a big IT infrastructure we are moving, and it's quite a mission-critical system. So we are doing quite a lot of open-heart surgery with the move. At the same time, there's a lot of complexity, and I will come back to that complexity in a moment. So now, coming back to the theme of police. So imagine like myself, you sit there, as I did 3 years ago when we started the FinOps journey, to say, look, managing this cloud budget centrally, it's kind of a very hard stuff. I'm expected to hit a target, but I'm not controlling the deployment. If I want to hardly control the deployment, I'm going to slow down the business. So how am I going to go there? And then they say, okay, what about give the people the accountability who can control it? Relatively straightforward, right? So I said, okay. And we developed the motto of you own it, you run it, you pay for it. Just to describe that things, right? So whoever is deploying some workload on the cloud, they are responsible for it, they are running it, DevOps transformation, So why not get those guys also to be accountable for the cost and the forecasting? It sounded to me quite logical at the first place. I said, okay, that's the solution. Just at the very high level, do you guys kind of buy that logical argumentation, or you see there is a fundamental issue with that? Right? So someone would take that with me together to my executive? At least one volunteer? Oh, thank you very much. All right, so okay, let's go to the execs. Again, 2.5 years ago, said, okay, we have the solution. It's very straightforward, it's very logical, that's the place to go. We give the accountability for the people who deploy resources and to the business. What did I got? No, 9. No, thank you very much, and that was the more polite version. So I said, okay, first try never works. Chris, you need to work on the pitch. Worked on the pitch, went to the second executive, this time without a thank you. Okay, so we need to change the game, all right? We need to change the approach. So what are the 4 things, now looking back, I should have done better, or we could have done better as an organization to go faster? And I will go through each of them one by one, all right? But just to give you a high-level idea, of course you need to earn the trust. There's a lot of things about transparency in FinOps, and especially need to engage and speak to the people, their language, so build a business view. Then we have a lot of different stakeholders, as we always speak about that in FinOps. I have some interesting learnings on that one, and the fact that I had one story which didn't work for all of those guys. They all want to have their own stories. Okay, let's create different stories. Then how we use some of the common practices which is shared in the foundation to really help us kind of getting through that line of defense, so to speak. And last but not least, my favorite is really how to do an enterprise transformation beyond the FinOps transformation. Okay, so if you are ready, let's start with the first one. I need to warn you, it's a very complex slide. It's still my favorite slide, but I will build it up slowly, okay? So coming back also to Amadeus, the way we deploy on the cloud, obviously we use the cloud providers. We deploy our own technical middleware and technical platform on top of it, so we extract the cloud providers a bit, and also this way it gives us flexibility. Then we deploy our applications, and then we have a product. Yeah? So you have the cloud resources, you have the platform application product. For this picture, I kept it very simple. Unfortunately, we have a many-to-many relationship. So imagine like 100 platform components, 200 plus application components, serving 150 products, just to give you an idea. Many-to-many, everybody talks to everybody, because as a passenger, when you travel and you book a hotel, a flight, and the car, all those people want to get access to your data, know to you, and to serve you, all right? So all those things are really intertwined. So what we did is to realize that you need to speak and find the right language, and we are going into technical NSM is our version of the unit economics, so that's the North Star metric, where we said, let's not focus on one unit economics, but find the right unit economics at the right level and for the right audience. Okay, so this is the, when in Rome, speak like the Romans. Let's try to do that. So we have Central FinOps, of course, focusing on rate, platform DevOps, technology, application, and so on and so forth. Then we said, okay, let's define the unit cost for the platform, define the unit cost for the application, and define the unit cost for the product. Why do we do that? Because if you are a platform provider, you have no idea what is happening from a business transaction perspective. You know the number of reads and writes, you know the access to the database, but how does it translate to an end user transaction in an environment which is very, very complex? It's not always visible, all right? And this way, what we can also get is a unit cost commitment. So basically, we want the platform team to commit on a unit cost for their technical service and their technical unit, The application knows what are the commitments I get from the unit who I'm using, the services I'm using, and the same way on the top with the product, obviously that's where you have ideally your billing metric is the same metric as the unit cost. So where we go with this is that if we build up that unit cost commitment throughout the layer, we solve a couple of problems. One, we are able to speak the people their language, right? We are also able to connect the different layers, which is again in our case, excuse me, is quite a challenge. And ultimately, what would enable us, then we can drive the planning and forecasting from the top, from the business. So if we know that the cloud cost of a passengers boarded, just to take that example, then we can derive, based on the expected volumes, what would be the cloud spend for next year. And then if we spend more or less, immediately we have the right conversation with the finance team that, wow, we spent 10% more, but we have 10% more passengers. That's good, right? And also, not to give too many hints, but you can say, look, we are spending exactly on budget, so we are pretty cool. Unfortunately, we dropped the volume by 15%. So actually, we should be minus 15 in terms of spend. Those are the things the classical finance budgeting approach doesn't really cater. So that was basically the key enabler for us to really have a conversation on cost efficiency, because we can measure the unit cost. How efficient is the platform providing their units? How efficient the application is? And obviously, how efficient the product on top of it. It enables us of cost predictability. We can agree on a target at each layer, whichever we want, and that's basically the people who will be measured on. A technical platform component might not have influence how many business queries it's going to receive, right? But it can influence the unit cost. It provides those responses. And at the end, obviously, it all goes back to the overall product profitability. So that was really our approach to try to build the transparency, engage the people the way they were able to engage, and build these links between those different layers, which otherwise they operate in a very complex environment, to put it mildly. So far, so good? Okay. Now, coming to the most soft part of addressing the stakeholders, you might have heard about transformational leadership. They have a notion of background conversation. So basically, what I'm thinking while I'm saying something. And it really took me a while to realize that there was a lot of those. So when I came with, oh, this is a very logical idea to do, there was a lot of thinking which was very difficult first to grasp. Because what I received as an answer why it wouldn't work was not that. At least I couldn't find someone who said, look, Chris, we are not doing this, all right? Because then it is not longer in my organization, and if it's not my organization, I might not be at the table where the big cake is being distributed, all right? So I'm not saying it's true in your organizations. I'm just saying there is a distant possibility that some of these things you might be able to notice. So what did I learn the hard way? Well, having a great idea, or not a great, but having an idea doesn't really take you far, all right? So you need to get the organization behind you and understand what is driving the different people. And you might get some help when reality is going to drive change, when cloud is breaching the old legacy processes, but it might be a bit rough and it might be a bit late, all right? So if you can anticipate that, I think definitely helps. And the ones who are, like myself, have the pleasure and the opportunity to run a central FinOps team, do not forget them, all right? I didn't thought it's going to happen, but I realized at some stage, it's like, part of my team, they have fears. And to me, it was clear, like, well, Central FinOps will prosper and we will have even more opportunities to contribute than before. Why would I care to keep that hassle of trying to keep the budget centrally? But that was not that obvious to them, all right? So do not forget, when you think about how to share the joy of managing cloud budget with all of your other peers, don't forget your own team. So, with that, now moving to the third part is really about how to use some of the tools which are out there to help make it. And one thing for us to realize that it is okay to accept we will have a transition period and we will be not perfect. Which, again, the ones who are a bit more engineer background, like myself, sometimes it's difficult to accept. You know, we had our vision, where we want to go, how it should look like. But then between current reality and the future, there is a big gap, but we still aim for the future. Now, if the gap is too big, it's a bit difficult to get the organization to go with you on the journey. So we need to build a path so people can follow you, all right? And there was two elements we basically said, okay, let's agree that for some things we will do different during the transition. And the second, agree that there are some things which we should be doing and we will be doing at a future point of time, we are just not doing until we are there. Okay, and to build transparency also on that. It helped a lot on our side. So just to pick up two examples, what we call default cost allocation. So of course we want to allocate cost as everybody in this room by measuring every service, their consumption, and we allocate it based on those metrics. Very good. What if I don't have the metric? Right? It will take some time to develop it. They said, okay, let's come up with some other methods where based on subscription, based on whatever you have to say, look, the parts which I cannot allocate based on true consumption, I still have an approximation and I will still show it that way. As soon as I have better data, we will swap and we will based on a true metered consumption. The one which says no strict physical controls, it's more related to the fact that we are migrating all those workloads I mentioned before to the cloud. So we have a very tight and aggressive schedule on the migration, so we need to be a little bit careful how much physical endorsement we want to take place at some point of time, as it might slow down the migration. But basically you create a list of things to say, look, this, we make a deliberate decision, we are not going to execute the way we are supposed to execute, or we are not doing those deliberately at this stage. Which is like the automatic execution of a cloud provider recommendation. We said, look, it's a North Star, we want to do it, but again, due to other reasons, like you all want to catch your flight, and when you put your mobile into the boarding gate, you want to have a response time which is really, really fast. So maybe we do not want to automate all the right sizing or the right sizing recommendation right away, because then the response time might not be what our customers expect. But okay, this is our choice. You can make your own choices. But I think what could be interesting is to say, make a deliberate decision. What do we do differently, or what do we don't do during the transition? Still on the same topic of how to use some of the common knowledge which is out there. We said, okay, let's create a RACI. Okay. You can say, look, everybody can create a RACI. Yeah, it's not about that. It is just to give you a short illustration that for an organization which is roughly 18,000 people, 10,000 engineers, just to give you a feel to the size. So we have quite a decent organization in terms of size. We said, okay, let's keep it simple. All right? We want to make everybody onboarded in this journey. Let's keep it simple. So from all those FinOps personas, allied personas, core personas, we said, okay, let's create few big categories. And you see the 5 we created. So for example, in engineering, we have product management, DevOps, R&D. It's kind of a very, very broad grouping. Well, Central FinOps is the first one. Don't ask me why. We said, okay, let's pick the ones which is relevant to us, and at the same time also pick the domains which we feel most important for us for the next 2 years. I know there's a lot of other domains, but again, my recommendations or my learning, try to keep it simple first. So we basically said, okay, those are the 9 things we want to tackle, right? It could have been anything else. We had some debate on this, but at the end, the most important that this is done. And then we did a very simple Excel file, right? You don't need to read it, but just to show that for an organization of our size, the size of our operations, basically we were able to fit in 1 slide. Well, you could argue it's not really fully readable, so okay, pick 2 slides, all right? But again, just to say that this was the vehicle where combining some industry practice, which is, in this case, was the FinOps Foundation, applying the Amadeus specificities and to try to make it simple, we relatively quickly, once we figured out that this is what we want to do, were able to come to the conclusion, okay, this is how distributed FinOps will work for us in Amadeus. What are the tasks? Who will do what? And basically, it was also relatively quickly and straightforward in a course of like 3 months. We went from initiation to give it signed off by all the execs. And from there, you can really start the machinery of onboarding, which is for us is the enterprise business transformation. So the 4th pillar I mentioned before. Then we had some interesting conversations, and to me this is really the non-technical, non-engineering challenge, but that's where a lot of the things are being decided. One is the global principles or incentive model. So let me explain a bit. What we mean there is, assuming we move the accountability to the business units, to the users of the cloud, so basically they do the forecast, they get the actuals, they need to explain to finance why there are deviations, but they are much better positioned to have that conversation because they are the ones that are closer to the business. They understand, is it good business growth, is it bad business growth, what is happening. What happens if they are able to save money? Okay, what will happen with that money? And that's quite a critical thing when you move from central to decentral. Because in some organizations, theoretically, that could be the tendency. We say, savings go to here, and you can imagine your own organization where the here is, all right? But if you remove that savings from the organization who is saving it, where is the incentive? Why would they spend their own time, effort, energy, all that to save money, which then afterwards, and again, I don't want to pick any organization what it could be, but that some other organization take control of that, right? Which is, by the way, was the challenge for us as well. It was in central. We had a central budget. If someone was spending less, we were very happy because I was able to offset something else, right? But we were missing completely the incentive for the people to come the journey and do the savings. And this is not a simple topic to get alignment across the organization, but I think it's very important that you start those conversations, obviously with business lines, with finance, in a relatively early stage. Because this is, to me, the most frequently asked questions, by the way, even up until now in Amadeus. No matter who I speak engineering, business, product management, they basically say, what happens if I save? Who will control that money? What can I do with the money? Can I offset something else on a different product? Can I even transform this money to use it for a different cost line? In other words, can I hire people for that? Can I spend on something else? Can I buy a software for it? So all sorts of different questions will come up. And I don't think there is a single solution how to do that, But to me, there is one solution. There has to be a global incentive. So whatever you come up with, try to make sure that there is something in there for the people who are saving. I'm not saying it has to be 100% of the money and full autonomy and they do whatever, because we all have obviously corporate target and guidelines and rules, but you need to keep that incentive, right? Keep that in mind. That's what I say, global incentive, how it really works at the global level. To me, that was quite a breakthrough. When we were able to settle on that one, all of a sudden you started to say, now there is a path. Now we are going somewhere. Huh? Then the other three is stage gates. As I said a bit before, it's really cool to aim for the nirvana, to the ideal solution where we want to go. Going in there one step, maybe some of you are more lucky than I was, the gap was so big, it's just like no way we jump from here to there, right? Especially if you have an organization size like ours behind you, it's a bit difficult. So really think of what are the stages, and I will show you the example how we did it, which we need to go through on this journey. And with that, there are accountabilities. You take the RACI, which we saw before, then there are different versions of the RACI. There is the version of after transition, and then there is something in between. And last but not least, I think it's fairly obvious, but if I would start again, maybe I would have approached it slightly differently. Really spend time to upskill beyond engineering. Engineers, because they are closer to the cloud, they have a natural tendency to understand some of the dynamics better. There are some other parts of the organizations who we need in this enterprise transformation. They are a bit further away, right? Which means the further they are away, the more time you need to help them to get them on board. So obviously, the earlier you need to start them. Right? What we did, we started to engage with engineers because we wanted to get the cost, we wanted to get all those nice cost allocations which you see, to realize that, we need to work now with the product managers. And then we had the first session, and then I said, this is going to be a long journey. Huh? So when you start those personas who are further away, at least in your planning, the earliest. You will still probably engage the people who are closer to the cloud first, because that's natural. But you should think of how can I plan all those different personas, education, that at the same time, ideally, they all come together. So what did we do for the product and the gates? We basically looked at, we want to engage the product managers beyond speaking their own language. We need to see how we can divide and conquer to some extent. And because we are part of, or we are in the middle of a major migration, it wasn't that straightforward. So what we basically said, let's divide all our products into two. And we call them, let's go, and let's prep. And we come up with some very simple rules, as you saw it. This is one-to-one, not a specially edited slide which we show internal. Yeah? If your product is close to, and there is always some flexibility, but close to 100% on the cloud, but the applications which are serving the product, because as I described, we have 10, 15 applications serving a single product. If they are on the cloud and we have some certain visibility on the COD, well, congratulations, you are in group one as a product manager, right? If not, you are on the second one. But the second one doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It basically just means you guys need to prepare. So with that, actually, we realized we have more product in the group one than as we originally thought, which is good, right? You have some product which might not go through a migration because we started later and it goes cloud native. We have some small applications which we just decided to lift and shift to the cloud because that was the easiest. But the interesting thing was we were able to find the nucleuses where we can able to engage the product managers. Now, they are not our biggest application with 10,000 servers each, but they were still something where the whole end-to-end chain, which I showed before, the platform application product, we were able to demonstrate. And then basically we said, okay, we had the RACI, which you saw before. Then we had two versions, the target, where we want to be. That's nirvana. Every business unit takes full financial accountability. They execute all their responsibilities. And then something which we do in transition, right? Where basically we start with the ones which, as soon as they reach milestone 1, so then the let's go, we start executing with those products, and when the migration finishes, then basically the second category goes as well. It's not rocket science, I agree. It is really just to show some relatively simple way of expressing this helps you, or at least helped us a long way to help the organization on this journey, which at sight could look scary. All right, if we are on our site and our size, and you see the mission criticality of the applications and products we are running, and the financial exposure linked to that. I mean, you don't want thousands of passengers waiting in front of the airport because they can't even get to their flights. Obviously, there is a lot of nervousness when you want to rock something which is as central as how we are going to manage those cloud spend. My last kind of very key elements before we'll wrap up for the takeaway and make sure that you have enough time for questions is the things I realized, or we realized as an organization. What are the fundamental changes when we go from central to decentralized cloud budgeting? And it touches through a lot of things, and finally I will come to this policy to orchestrator back. But I don't know how you did it, but in our case, because we used to run our own data center, because we used to have all the infrastructure budget with the CTO, which is basically my boss, most of those budgets were built by quite some technical people from a very technical view. You know, you could see different technologies, you could show different platform components, you could show different hardware providers, you could show different software providers in there. Now, that speak to us was not speaking to anybody else in the business, right? Say, look, this is the cost of software package A. It's like, okay, thank you. How does it relate to the product I'm selling to the market? I don't know, and maybe I don't even want to know. So, while we move this accountability, we also need to realize that the whole budgeting structure, we need to change and reflect, because if we want to budget from the top, from the products, that's the structure we need to have, and not the structure which we used to have, which is more from the bottom when you have data center and software and hardware and cloud cost as well. Really, our goal is to drive the forecasting based on those product North Star metric or product unit cost, which you saw, which was in the highest level, all right? That's what we want to drive, and underneath, we want to make sure that we have the unit cost commitment on the application and on the platform. Yeah, so basically, the product manager on the top says, look, I have 1 million passengers boarded next year. That's my cloud cost for it. That's exactly what I need, and it is based on the unit cost commitment of X and Y and Z. And as soon as the year starts, we are able to see, both on the top line, but also on the underlying layers, are we sticking to our unit cost commitment? Do we have a technology-driven problem? Or do we have a business-driven problem? Or maybe we don't have a problem at all. Now, the biggest thing is when we do that we kind of move away from a fixed, what I call fixed single line budget. So you have a budget and you have a number, all right? This is a euro, this is a big number, it's many digits at some stage depending on how you aggregate. But to think differently. Think about what is the cost per unit? And that's what is driving your budget. Because as soon as you do your business forecast and you submit it, I don't know in your business, but I can tell you in my business, as soon as the business forecast is submitted, next week if I talk to the business, I have a different forecast. Which is just life. But basically means that if I try to always come back to a single line, to a fixed number, I will always change this number, right? I can do quarterly cycles, I can do monthly cycles, I could do weekly cycles. Well, I cannot afford to do a weekly, but it will always change. But if I budget cost per unit, then I have a number. And basically we just measure the units coming in on the top. I mentioned about the incentive, so the global incentive. That's really key. If you only look at one thing from a financial side of this transformation, I would go with the incentive one. I mean, this unit cost is interesting, and I think it's very useful, but without the incentive, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. And then there is obviously also the notion of long-term plans. But it's your planning cycle, so sometimes we do yearly cycles, and then there's a 3-year more longer-term vision. When you fix those budgets, well, in the cloud it doesn't really work, and I guess to most of you this is no surprise, but maybe there are some people in the organization who find it a little bit more difficult to realize that a target set half a year ago might not be that relevant when we speak. So it's really how we are going to move to a more agile, I would say, if I want to use an engineering term, budgeting process using this cost per unit budgeting, where we give commitments on unit cost, we agree obviously on targets, but we already link it in a nice way to the business. So there is always a budget, but that is basically automatically, so to speak, adjusted as we see the business evolving. The one before last, maybe it's obvious to many of you, we realized that we have a few cases where our cost drivers were not the same as the revenue drivers. Right? And those are the things you, as a practitioner, you really, really need to watch out. When we started to build those unit costs at different layers, we said, oh, this service cost is being driven by this. And then when you start to go a layer up and say, oh, but there is no connection to the revenue, right? Which obviously starts to ask the question, do I have the right charging model for the product? Yeah, because if I have a cost driver which is different than my revenue driver, it's going to be, and there be light. Then it's very difficult at some stage to really follow all those processes, right? And to understand what is happening and why. And I can share that our personal experience, that there was a really, really good conversations with our top executives when they realized that we have some products where on the cloud, we might need to think of a different charging model. Is it true for all of the products? No, thanks God. Yeah? But to be aware of that, I think that's a very good insight as from FinOps practitioners we could bring. Now we might not be in the position to decide, or at least in our case, it is not central FinOps to decide, but to engage another set of conversation with the pricing organization with whom, for example, we never really interacted before. And then they now come to us to say, look, what do you see from FinOps? What are the cost drivers of this product? So they can really make up their mind, what do we need to change in their pricing? So now I kind of spoke some time about, if you own central COD budget, let's give it to someone else. I mean, share the joy, share the fun. Does it mean that my central FinOps team will have no role in this? No. But I really see that the need is stronger than before, but it's a different role. We are not going to be the police anymore, who goes after every euro, try to ask why you are spending this, how can you justify, but it was different last month, why it was different last month, because they know that, or I know that the next day I need to show up in front of the finance guys and say, look, this is this and this and this and this, all right? But this whole thing, when you go from something which is done by a handful of people, then you have more than 100 people contributing, that it does require quite some orchestration to make sure that the assumptions are aligned. We are aligned on how do we value different things, what are the technical assumptions we are taking, all those things, and to me that's really the vision and the place where we are going, is how we can be the orchestrator of it. So instead of trying to be the police, we will be more the people who orchestrate, and people actually come to us. It's not because they have to. I mean, I don't know if you, I mean, I have nothing against police, but that's not the person you just go to the street to say, look, can we have a conversation? You know, I mean, they stop you and they say, and first thing is, okay, do I have the lights? Do I have the belts? What else too fast? You know, but while you still look at saying, good afternoon. So, but, you know, there is not a natural tendency to engage the conversation. While if you are a conductor or an orchestrator, people like to be in an orchestra. They like to engage. They like to show the good work they do. And then we can say, look, your forecast is pretty good. I think we could improve those 3 things, but it's already good. You know, it's a different conversation than as opposed to they spend a week before to say, look, I want to get this more money, so how I'm going to get this, right? Instead of to say, look, this is how am I don't understand this part, I don't understand this part, this is what I think, and then we kind of work out together. And to me, that's a real key transformation I'm pushing from my team. Are we fully there? Not yet, but I also need to speak something about the next conference. So, but we are almost there, so just to wrap it up, that you make sure you have also questions, time for questions. To make it very simple, change management, we all know that's really, really key. But you need to earn the trust, and the trust is coming through transparency. If you remember, in Rome, speak like the Romans, or the right horse for the course. That's my favorite for that. And again, engage everybody. Again, FinOps is everybody business. You own it. You run it, you pay for it. So that's all from my side. As I said, it's not yet over, but at least we can engage something later. Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X Europe content on our YouTube channel playlist. Like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for speakers to help our channel. We appreciate your support.